Hey yo, what's up? Have you ever been curious about how to really utilize the sampling capabilities of Push 2? Really get under the hood and see how you can create all sorts of different remixes and reimaginations on some of the musical ideas and riffs you have? Well, in this video, we're going to dive deep on some of my best tips for sampling on the Push 2. So let's jump in. Hey yo, what's up everyone? In this video, we're going to dive deep into looking at the Push 2 as a sampler. The Push 2 is an amazing instrument. It's an amazing controller for all sorts of things in Ableton, but it is also a killer sampler. So I'm going to show you a bunch of cool tips and techniques and strategies that will help you get creative, stay inspired, all of that good stuff, all from Push. So let's dive in. All right, we're going to dive into a bunch of super powerful creative features that you can access directly from Push 2 because Push 2 is an amazing killer sampler as well as being an amazing MIDI controller and instrument in its own right. Hey yo, what's up? It's Alex from My Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help musicians such as yourself produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their inner artist in a deeper way. And in this video, we're talking all things Push 2 and sampling. We're going to talk about some killer tips to help you stay creative and get inspired and use the powerful features of Push 2 as much as possible. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about relative to getting samples and sampling with the Push 2 is how if you have audio, whether it's a pre-recorded sample, an audio loop, a drum loop, synth pad, whatever it is, even if you recorded audio into Ableton, you can easily get that into a sampler and start messing around with remixing it, resampling super easily with the Push 2. So first, let's find a drum loop and an audio loop that we like. All right, so we just have a drum loop loaded into an audio track. And for the fun of it, I'm gonna go ahead and find a melodic sample as well. All right, sure, this one's pretty cool. So we're gonna grab this and throw it into an audio track. All right, and you can create audio tracks directly from Push 2. So let's bring this back up. All right, so you can also add audio tracks directly onto Push 2 just by hitting add track here and selecting audio track. So now we have our drum loop here and our melodic loop there. And the first tip I want to share with you today is the simplicity of anytime you have audio inside the Push 2 on an audio track. Okay, so you could record guitar, you could record a synth, you could record your voice, whatever it is, as long as you have audio onto a track, you can select that track. So let's select the drum loop for now and hit this convert button. And then you'll notice that you get all of these awesome options, which I invite you to explore because a lot of these are really killer, really cool stuff. But what we're going to focus on right now is hitting simpler. All right, so simpler is the first one here. So if you hit that, just like magic, you'll notice that a simpler plugin popped up. And now if I play our middle C and hold it, it will play the drum loop. Right? If I let go, it stops playing. So this layout is like a typical sampler. I can play this drum loop like a melodic instrument. I can pitch it up. I can pitch it higher. I can even go lower. But notice that as the pitch goes up or down, it either speeds up or slows down. And that's super cool because we can actually play around with this super easily just within this simple view. All right, so to do that again, we can actually go to our melodic loop here. Again, we're gonna hit convert and we're gonna go to simpler. And boom, just like magic, we get a simpler loaded with the audio that we had on our audio track. And keep in mind that anytime you load audio onto a MIDI track in live, it will automatically pop up a simpler, but we just did it directly on the Push 2. All right, so this mode is great for, let's say, if you had a very short sample that you wanted to play melodically, if you had like a one shot, or if you just recorded some piece of audio in your studio and you want to play it like a melodic instrument, simply just throw it into a MIDI track. It'll load up a simpler and you can play this like an instrument. All right, so the next tip I want to share with you requires us to go to slice mode. And simpler in Push 2 has 3 different modes. It has classic, it has one shot, and it has slice mode. And you see them right here on Ableton to the left of our simpler right here. But we can actually get to that by moving this encoder in the top right here, and we can select the mode we want. All right, so now we're in slice mode and you'll notice that the pads changed. All right, and this is really handy for longer pieces of audio because now you can play it in slices, right? So now you're slicing up this audio and those slices correspond to different pads on your Push 2. So if I hit these different pads, you'll notice that they'll play different parts of our sample relative to the cuts that Ableton has made. Right, so that's super cool. And there are different things you can play around with this. So right now you'll notice that Simpler is in what is called transient mode. All right, so if we mess with that, we can change this to beats. We can change this to region. We can change this to manual. And all of these different selections will change where the slices are. You'll notice that as I change this, the slices move. So the beats mode of Simpler will actually chop up your audio in slices relative to a specific beat division, right? You can change the division here if you wanted. We can go higher resolution, we could go lower, whatever you want. You can get some really cool things just by selecting a really high division and playing around with super short chopped up slices of audio. So that's one cool thing to do, right? You can play with that, right? We can go to transient, which is what it started as, and you can actually play around with the sensitivity, right? So right now it's detecting every transient, but let's say you wanted less slices. You could turn this down and maybe just get a few slices. Right, so that's super cool as well. But what I want to focus on, manual mode. So in this mode, we can actually have a lot of fun and get creative with chopping up samples, placing manual slices that we want live with the pads, which is super fun and super engaging. So how this works is basically we have our first pad here, which once I hit it, it will trigger the sample and make a slice right at the beginning. And then Ableton is actually waiting for me to hit the next pad, which will create another slice wherever I decide to hit it. And this will continue and continue until I decide to stop. So a great technique to use with this is to have one hand ready on the pad and then have another hand ready on this nudge control. And what this nudge control will do will actually allow you to edit the slices that you are making in real time, because it might be tricky to make all these slices manual in time on a loop and get them perfectly to what you want. So this is a great way to actually get fine-tuned manual slices, but with your hands. So keep in mind that my left hand will be hitting new pads to create new slices. And then my right hand is going to be on this nudge control to actually fine tune and fine adjust those new slices I'm making as I make them. And I might be re-triggering the same slice so I can actually fine tune it. So I'll show you a workflow of how you can do this. I encourage you to follow along. So notice how quick that was to make all these custom slices. Now each of these pads, when I trigger them, will play the slices that I created. Right, super fun. Right, so here's our drum loop. We're in classic mode, remember. So I'm actually going to go to slice mode, and I'm going to go to manual, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to chop up this beat with new slices and then adjust them as I make them. So just like that, you can see how easy it is to create your own custom slices. And again, now that I play these pads, they're triggering the different slices I've created. Right, and that's great to play around and have fun with. But the next tip I want to actually share with you is how to take this to the next level and how to really unlock the next level of sampling capabilities with Push 2. All right, so now that we have these slices created, what we can do is actually hit convert once again. All right, and you'll notice that it brings up the option to convert to a drum rack. All right, so let's go ahead and hit that and talk about what happens here. So you'll notice that all of our slices are still there. These are all the same things, right? Nothing has changed there, but what's happened is this has been placed inside a drum rack, right? And if you've been playing the Push 2 for a while, you'll know that the drum rack has its own mode where you can actually select a sample and you can sequence it in at the top. You can select loop lengths and you can play around with all these different slices similarly to what we had in the simpler view. Where the power of this really comes in is not only in the ability to, let's say, sequence a drum beat. So I could select one of these. I could start making a beat. But where the real power of this comes in is that in every single one of these drum hits, you'll notice that there's a new simpler. All right. Each of these hits have been created into a new simpler within the drum rack. So I hope you can see where this is going. Now you have super deep levels of control within each hit that you actually sliced up in the last step. All right. So for example, with this sample, it's a little bit late. So I can actually go in here and change the start time, right? I can maybe change the end time so it doesn't hit the beginning of the next hit, and you can edit it that way. You can do this with every sample independently. This one's a little late, so we can go in here, we can change the start time. Maybe let's extend the end time. But where this really gets powerful is when you start looking at the in-depth controls for simpler for each of these things. So let's say you want to play around with this specific sample. You'll notice that on the simpler, we have a transpose control, right? We have a fade in, we have a fade out. So you can actually control those parameters independently for each of these samples. So let's say we want to pitch this up. All we would do is actually play the sample and turn up the transpose. Right? Not only that, we could also play around with the fade in and the fade out. All right, so hopefully you can see how that's super powerful. You can actually chop up samples, pitch them differently, fade them in and out as you want, but that's not all. If you actually want to go deeper, you can select a sample and you can hit the slice, all right? And what the slice will actually bring up is the simpler plugin in your Push 2 view, right? So when I hit this slice button, it opened up the simpler. And now if I hit the simpler, you'll notice that it brings up all of the controls that you see in Ableton here. You get access to all of these controls relative to the sample that you have selected, because all of these cells in the drum rack are now holding a different slice of what we sliced up, and they all have independent controls. All right, they have a lot of things that you can play around with. All right, so if we open up the simpler plugin and we see more parameters here, yes, we have the transpose still, we have the fade in, the fade out, but now we have the option to warp as 0 bars or 1 bar, whatever it may be. And what this will allow you to do if you hit it is it just kind of edits the slice that you have to be 1 unit of time of whatever tempo you have selected in your tempo map. But what's powerful about this is now we can actually divide it by 2, we can multiply it by 2, we can reverse this, right? We can do all sorts of cool stuff within the simpler view. So let's say we wanted to divide this by 2, right? Now it's twice as fast. If we go the other way, now it's twice as slow. Right? It's this really like stretched out thing. We could also go back to normal. We could hit reverse. Now this sample is reversed. Right? Isn't that cool? And you can still change the fade in and the fade out of all of these different slices after you reversed it, right? You can do anything you want pretty much. So you want a quicker fade in. Now we could throw this in our beat. So let's say we want to put this in here, and let's listen to that. right? Isn't that super trippy? So let's say we want to add a snare. Let's find a snare. Let's put that there. Let's see what this sounds like. Right? And just by doing simple things like this, you're creating rhythms and patterns and just vibes that you probably would have never come up with any other way. All right, so this is actually such a powerful way to edit samples in a fun way and edit the slices individually, right? I hope your mind is starting to see the possibilities and the power of this as you get a larger piece of audio, maybe something you recorded, your voice, a sample like we worked with here. You chop it up into slices, convert it to a drum rack. Now every slice is its own sampler, right? So you can mess around with the velocity, the fade in, the fade out. You can crop it and then reverse it. You can also divide it by 2 or times it by 2 time-wise, change it around and create really cool edits within the drum rack. And this is just a lot more hands-on. You can do this stuff manually by all means, but I just like to have something that's a little bit more engaging and tactile. So let's actually go to our melodic slices that we have here. Right, we have all these different melodic chops, and let's actually do the same thing. Let's hit convert. Let's go to drum rack, and boom, just like that, you'll notice that all of these slices have now gotten populated in their own drum rack, right? And that means that each of these hits are their own sample. Like we can see here, when we hit a sample, it brings up a sampler for that sample, right? So we can do the same thing here. We can change the pitch. So let's say we want this to be lower, right? You can hack jazz by starting to transpose these things. It's a little lower. Right? You can have fun with that. You can change the tempo. You can go deeper by hitting the slice, opening up the sampler. Right? You could crop this. Let's reverse this one. Right? That's pretty creepy. All right. The next tip that I want to share with you is super cool. And this is actually kind of a hidden feature, but by default, when Ableton chops up a sample and loads it into a drum rack, you'll notice that we are in one-shot mode, which for most cases is probably a good choice, meaning that you hit it and it plays once. However, if we go to classic mode, right? So we can select the sample, go to simpler, go to the main controls, and we can change the mode in the top right here and go to classic. What this will actually allow you to do is play with these 4 controls: the attack, decay, sustain, and release. And that is super powerful to play around with per sample. All right, so once we're in classic mode for one of our samples, we can go into the settings of the sampler and we can select envelopes, and then we get this volume envelope. And this is super powerful because you can play with the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release time for every sample individually. All right, so the possibilities with this, the flexibility of this is so powerful. Another cool thing that we can do within the drum rack is, since each of these cells in the drum rack are their own simpler plugin, you can actually add different effects to different slices. So let me show you an example of that. So let's go to audio effects, throw a redux on this first one. Right, so now we kind of added some noise, added some change to this. Let's say we want to add maybe a delay. Let's add an echo to this other one. Now we have a delay on this sample. Right, you can control the volume of each of these if something's too loud. Right, you can do all these things from the push to, keep that in mind. But now we have a delay that's only on this one cell. And now when we go to this cell, there's our redux. Right, with this, you can create a whole palette of sounds and effects and textures all at the tips of your fingers and really have kind of a plethora of sounds and things to work with, all from the tips of your hands. And getting all of this incredible sound design and unique sounding stuff all just from the Push 2 and playing around with messing with these samples, adding effects, moving them around. And it really is helpful to inspire new creative ideas. So now what we could do is actually maybe pencil those into this beat that we created. Right, so that quickly, we're getting something unique, inspiring. This is already giving me a bunch more ideas, so I hope you can see the power of this. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production and feeling completely overwhelmed by the process, or you're having trouble finishing tracks, or hey, if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that helps you go from your very first ideas all the way to a finished arrangement, get to your mix, and then get a master on it so you can release it and share it with the world and get better and better. So if you're interested in checking that out, there's a link to it in the description below. All right, and that wraps it up for this video. And we've only just scratched the surface, the tip of the iceberg of what is possible with sampling and the Push 2. But I hope that I actually showed you some cool creative ways, some cool techniques, some cool ways to look at this to help you get more creative and inspire you to get more into sampling with the Push 2, because it is such a powerful tool to get creative with and to stimulate new creative ideas. So let me know, is Push 2 a huge part of your music production? Is it something you use a lot, or is it something that you're still learning? How about sampling? Do you use samples in your music? Did this inspire you to actually use samples in your next track? I'd love to hear how you use the Push 2 to sample or in any other way in your music productions. And we'll see you in the next video.